So we are 15 days out of the national elections. My name is Yao Sompa. What we've been trying to do over the last few weeks is to provide policy context for purposes of helping you make a decision towards the national election. This is our fourth video in the series, and today after framing the context, we get into the meat of the manifestos and the policies and really put them side by side each other. Actually, before I start with the text of the policies, let me tell you something. So after we published the third video, which was framing the context and literally spelling what we thought was our understanding of the context in which we're taking the election, which are the hard questions anybody who takes of the power must consider. I had a conversation with two friends who actually are known politicians, well, not in the front line, but they are known to belong to parties. Now, we're very good friends and we talk, and I think I suggested in the last video I've been having very interesting conversations with a couple of friends. So I met these friends and then we had a conversation literally about the context. It appears that from both sides, nobody disagrees on what the context is. Now, the real conversation was who was better placed to lead us through the context. Of course, each one of them says their party was better placed. So we decided to have a very interesting little challenge, which was to say, let's feed off the manifestos of each of the parties into Google's notebook, right, which is basically an AI that analyzes source documents, and then you can interact with it and provide questions. So we actually did provide the policies of each one of the candidates, and we fed it to Google's notebook, and then we asked it an interesting question. I'm going to read a text of what the question was and what the answer was as a basis for which I'm about to have the conversation we're about to have. So for purposes of the specific context and what exactly we asked notebook, which was basically the AI, we sought to understand a few things. And the very first thing, so we actually fed it with the manifestos of MPP, NDC, the Great Transformational Plan by Alan, and also Nana Kwame Bediako's plan, right? And this was an exact text of the question my two friends who belong to two different political heritage, or two politicians of two different identities, and myself, whom they say I have a confused political leaning, right? Because one day I appear to be for B, the other day I appear to be for A. Well, I know you're watching this, and for both of you, what I say is that the clarity in what I think our politics should be is not in the duopoly, or it should not be in the identity of a party, but in the ideologies and the best ideas. It's a shop for the best ideas. So, of course, you know what I was saying, the best ideas should win, and what I'm here to do is to interrogate the ideas as it's proposed. Now, so we fed the LLM with the parties, and we asked a very specific question. Based on your understanding of the context of Ghana's based on your understanding of the context of Ghana's economic challenges, which of the manifestos have the more likely solution? Highlight the specific solutions and why you rate them as more coherent policy, right? Now, it came back with an output. Well, I'm going to read exactly what it says, but let me tell you a couple of things that came up in the conversation. Now, for the MPP friend, his primary point is that if you want continuity and consistency, they are the party to go for. And I think that if you think, and whoever you are, if you think that there's been a great 8 years, then of course the biggest argument is for you to continue, right? And I think that the MPP, for example, has some great things going for it, particularly in the front of education. Amazing results they've seen in education. If you see the ratio of secondary to secondary education, people going through secondary education, phenomenal. We know that every developed nation must have a certain minimum, about 40% being in tertiary, and so they've inched us closer. We've seen basic outcomes being improved. Now, the real question of relevance and whether the education transforms the society is a more relevant conversation. But I think that on access and even on some part of quality, they have something really strong for them. Where their biggest problem, and where I think my NDC friend has the biggest jump, is the state of the economy. You cannot seem to convince anybody that barring any context, right? Because of course context will always happen. So whether it's Russia, Ukraine, whether it's Israel, Hamas, whatever the context will always remain, right? But the real conversation and the real weakness the MPP has is how do you explain that you learn at a time where the economy is seeing some of its worst dips, and yet you're the person to help resolve it. Now, on the economic side, clearly you can't seem to sustain an argument to say that, well, I may have been in the helm of affair and seen some of the greatest economic downturns, but on the economy I'm the forefront. So if you listen carefully to the campaigns, NPP is heavily focusing on education, NDC is heavily focusing on economy, for example. Now, the context I'm trying to set is that the question we ask the notebook is purely an economic question. So, and because we set the context and we frame the context to say we're dealing with some of the worst economic time, let me answer this question and then we can analyze the economic policy of both sides, and then subsequently we'll look at other policies of each one of them. So, as I said, the specific question we ask is based on your understanding of the context of Ghana's economic challenge, which of the manifestos have the more likely solution, highlight the specific solutions and why you rate them as a more coherent policy, right? Now, the answers, and I'm reading specifically, I'm reading the text of Google's LLM, which is its notebook. The text of it, nothing is my word, everything is textual according to the AI. It says that the sources provide contains excerpts of the manifesto of the three political parties in Ghana: the New Patriotic Party, the National Democratic Congress, and the Movement for Change. These manifestos address the economic challenges facing Ghana, providing a range of solutions for considerations. Based on analysis of the sources, the NDC manifesto presents more coherent and comprehensive solution for Ghana's economic challenges. For the following reasons: 1. Acknowledgement of the economic crisis. The NDC manifesto explicitly recognizes the severity of the economic crisis, emphasizing its unprecedented nature, including Ghana's first time ever default under the Fourth Republic. This acknowledgement suggests a deeper understanding of the issues at hand. Conversely, the NPP manifesto, whilst acknowledging the economic difficulties, primarily focuses on the positive milestones achieved during their tenure and their ability to turn things around. 2. Focus on specifics. Targeted solution. The NDC manifesto outlines targeted policies proposals for each sector, addressing challenges like unemployment, high inflation, and the depreciation of the currency. It proposes into bracket 24-hour economy policy to stimulate businesses and job creation, a made in Ghana agenda to promote local production and consumption, and Ghana First framework to prioritize industrialization. It also suggests specific tax relief measures, including scrapping the e-levy, COVID levy, and other taxes to alleviate hardship. These specificities suggest a more actionable plan. The NPP manifesto, while containing some specific initiative, tends towards a broader goal and commitment, leaving the details less clear. Number 3, emphasis on restoring fiscal discipline. The NDC manifesto emphasizes restoring fiscal discipline and debt sustainability as a key priority. It proposes measures like prudent expenditure management, scaling up revenue mobilization, and the comprehensive public debt management. The emphasis on addressing the root cause of the economic crisis indicates a more long-term vision. The NPP manifesto, whilst mentioning expenditure control, focuses more on promoting business growth and leveraging technology. Number 4, focusing on social inclusion and public welfare. The NDC demonstrates a clear commitment to social inclusion, addressing the need for women, youth, children, persons with disability, the elderly, and the marginalized group. It promotes empowerment, equal access to public access, and protection of abuse. This focus suggests a more people-centric approach to economic recovery. The NPP manifesto, while addressing certain social issues, places less emphasis on this aspect. The next, it says that broad stakeholder consultation. The NDC manifesto highlights its development through extensive consultation with various stakeholders, including organized labor, civil society youth groups, women groups, and more explicitly detailed the extent to which the stakeholders' engagement in its formulation. Whilst the movement for change also presents a vision for Ghana's transformation through the Great Transformational Plan, its focus appears broader, encompassing political and social reform along economic policies. The document emphasizes the need for constitutional reform, a non-partisan approach to governance, and national development plan transcending individual parties' manifestos. Whilst commendable, these broader goals may not directly address the imminent and immediate economic crisis with the same level of urgency and specificity as the NDC manifesto. In conclusion, based on the available sources, the NDC manifesto offers a more coherent policy approach to Ghana's economic challenges. It is a clear recognition of the crisis, emphasizing on physical discipline and specific solutions and commitment to social inclusion, makes it a more comprehensive and actionable plan for addressing the country's economic woes. Now, I find what the AI says very, very interesting. You know, when we read this between my friends and myself, the interesting thing, and please, I beg you, do this, check the manifestos of both parties, put it in any source you can find, ask a more objective machine what they think, and let me know what you think, right? The conversation on both sides is that both sides, because it was not a human being's analysis of the results, both of them could not objectively argue with the AI, right? But the real conversation that happened after we read this was what I thought was interesting. So if you read it, the basis of which it says is that there's more emphasis on physical discipline, inclusion, 25-hour economy, and things like that. A couple of things I want to say. The very first thing is that I think that both parties acknowledge that there must be a Ghana First agenda, right? NPP has a variation of it, NDC has a variation of it. But the emphasis must be placed beyond the election. Whoever wins the election, if there is a Ghanaian employer, a Ghanaian producer supplying some service from knowledge to consulting to whatever, the emphasis should be how do we localize our GDP, because we understand that the GDP of Ghana is not particularly owned by Ghanaians, and so we can understand the problems that, so both parties do recognize that there needs to be a Ghana First agenda, and I think that that is a commendable policy both parties share. It must absolutely, whoever wins must have a clear focus on a Ghana First agenda. Now the second thing is that both parties do recognize that beyond a Ghana First, we need to tighten up a fiscal regime. Now that's where it gets tricky. Because you already have expenses, if you're going to tighten up, you're either going to completely reform your architecture of governance, or you're going to have to increase taxes in order to shore up the expenses which are defined. I think that for clear intention as to reform, both parties make a promise to say we will not govern with a certain number of ministers. But I think we need a more radical approach to reform. Even in the United States, there's a conversation about an office of government efficiency, right? Whether it's Elon Musk or whoever it is, but there's a clear intention to reform public service. And I think that that intention must be very clear and made very clear going forward, whoever wins. There must be a clarity for purposes of reform. We don't need more bureaucracies. What we actually need is efficiency. And so a clear thinking of building efficiency into the structure will be helpful. Now, the biggest problem, I think in our conversation, my friend on the NDC side, in as much as they struggle on the education foot, one of the bases for which they struggle is because in as much as they say they were an active part in starting free SHS, we all know that it is an MPP policy which was criticized. I think that the MPP may be making the same mistake with the 24-hour economy. Listen, you see, every country has a definite productive capacity measured in time, right? And so fixed time is what we use as the raw material to create productivity. Any nation that can summon a lot more of its 24-hour resource time, the number of people in the nation, the better the productivity of the nation is. 24-hour economy, there are economic papers measuring luminosity, which is how dark a place gets at night as a correlation to GDP of the people. So there's clear signs, there's clear data in suggesting that if we can harmonize the more resource capacity of Ghanaians to generate more work and employment and more productivity beyond a schedule of 8 to 5, the nation will be better for it. And so the clear agenda to almost oppose that idea and to ridicule it as though is not a good coherent policy, I think is a problem. The same thing I think that NDC is having to pedal back and have a lot of problems with the free SHS, I think is the same problem we may end up seeing with a 24-hour economy. Of course, every policy implementation has its own struggles, and we're not talking about the implementation for now, we're talking about the idea in itself. Implementation is a different animal and is a different problem we have to deal with. Once we agree it's a good idea, the question is how do we do it in a way that brings out the outcome we're looking for. So in ending for today, what I want to say is that on both sides there is an acknowledgement that we need to prioritize Ghanaian productivity for Ghanaians. There's an acknowledgement of the fact that there needs to be some fiscal tightening, some fiscal discipline. There's a law on fiscal responsibility, right? But whatever the implementations of those, so whether or not is a new proposition or otherwise is not the conversation. The real point is that who will have the courage to reform public service in a way that falls in line with the efficiencies that is necessary for fiscal discipline. And the last thing I want to say for purpose of today is that whatever idea seeks to maximize the productive capacities of our people by using the raw material for productivity, which is primarily time of the people, the mindset, the creative capacity of our people, that is supposed to be a good idea. I was on a TV show with the national best farmer, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he says, for example, he harvests at 9, he has a big farm in Ghana, which he leaves at 9, he farms during the night under the light. I mean, why not? We play football under the floodlights. Nurses go to work all through the clock. Why not other sectors? So I really think that for purposes of this conversation, we should not trivialize good ideas simply because it may not come from us, because whatever the political tides tilt, we may end up being the guy who collects the best ideas. So my final point, don't be the politician who opposes an idea because it doesn't come from you. Be the collector of good ideas, and if even it is not your primary idea, if you do win power, whether it's MPP or NDC or Alan or Cheddar, whoever wins power must actively seek to harness the best ideas, and some of the best ideas we are starting this series with is the Ghana for Ghanaians, and productivity for Ghanaians. Buy Ghana first, Ghana for Ghanaians. That absolutely is a good policy. The second is a fiscal discipline and a reform of public sector in a way that can align with efficiencies. And the third we're saying is a 24-hour economy. By all means is a good idea, and we must seek, whoever wins must seek to implement some of these ideas. Thank you. We come your way next time with the next policy analysis as we get into the elections. I hope you find this useful. Stay safe, stay blessed, and thank you for being with us.